Welcome everyone to the Monomoy Regional School District for our meeting September 24th at 6:30. This meeting is being held partially remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 20. And because we're partially remote, we do need to do a roll call order. So we'll start in the Zoom room and just say your name and present. Joe, we'll start with you.
Joe Osceola, present.
Thank you. Sharon?
Present.
All right, thank you. Go around the room. Oh, can you say your name and present? Present.
Meredith Henderson, present.
Thank you.
Nancy Scott, present.
Terry Russell, present.
Tina Games, present. And before we move into the first order of business, I want to wish Terry a happy birthday. Yay! Happy birthday, Terry.
Thank you, Tina.
And also to share with everybody and our public, Joanne Sheehan will be returning next week. She'll be joining us for our school committee workshop, which is next Thursday, the 1st at 6 o'clock. So we'll be happy to have her back. Moving into approval of minutes from September 10th. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right, so, Nancy motioned, second, I think Jackie seconded. And any discussion? Any corrections? All right, we're going to have to do a roll call again. We'll start in the Zoom room with Joe.
Joe Osceola, yes for minutes.
Thank you. Sharon? And just, if you turn off your, or turn on your mic, and aye or nay. All right, so just.
Sharon, put your mouse on the bottom, remember? You see your little microphone? On the bottom of the screen.
Okay, so Sharon, just give us a thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay, good. Jackie?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's unanimous. And now we move into the next order of business, which is our student representative. Welcome, Amy Heinsley. You can come up to the mic.
Good evening, Monomoy School Committee. My name is Amy Heinsley, and I will be your MRHS student representative for the year. I'm so excited to get to know you all and keep you updated on our students' busy lives. Due to COVID, there have been a lot of changes and adjustments for the school year, but we are taking them in stride and it has been going extremely smoothly. We always wear masks, we have one-way hallways, socially distant classrooms and hallways, sanitizing stations, and other similar measures to ensure the safety of our students and staff. Everyone has been doing an amazing job keeping everybody safe by following the regulations, and we have seen the product of it in our ability to remain open during these unprecedented times. About 20% of our students are doing fully online instruction, which consists of a live class being streamed to their homes. This has been successful so far in helping students have the feel of a classic school day while being in the safety of their homes. The students that are doing hybrid are broken up into 3 cohorts, 2 out of the 3 being in the building every day, and it rotates. This transition into the building has also been very successful. Though some technological issues are expected, teachers and students have been managing and working everything out. Arrival and departure processes have also been very different this year compared to previous years, and despite the new protocols, every day has been efficient. Students are able to be dropped off and get classes on time in the morning and make it out to the buses in a manner that is swift yet safe for everyone. Speaking of which, one of the largest changes we faced this year has been our new schedule. We previously had a 7-day rotating schedule with 5 blocks per day, beginning at 8:45. This year, however, with the effort of our administrative staff, the schedule has been morphed to make COVID adjustments easier for all involved. We now begin the school day at 10:35 in the morning and have 3 blocks per day on an A-day, B-day schedule. And the students have been doing a fantastic job adjusting to this. Fall 1 sports are in full swing and heading into their 2nd week of practicing. The current sports, girls soccer, boys soccer, cross country, and field hockey, just got their game schedules and are excited to begin playing under the circumstances. We are playing with a lot of modifications in order to ensure the safety, but all the teams are making the best of it. A new Sharky friend you may see around our school is our new K-9 Frederick Von Fritz of the Harwich Police Department. Our school resource officer, Officer Clark, is working with Fritz as a vape and marijuana detection dog in our school to keep our students safe and healthy. There are a few new faculty members joining us this year in several departments across the school. For example, our new AP Government teacher, Mr. Sumner, came from teaching at the middle school and has already proven to be an outstanding teacher for our classes. I have not had the chance to personally meet all of the other new staff around the building, but I've heard only good things. Along with this, we have had staff changes, such as our new principal, Miss Police, and our new vice principal, Mr. Alexander. Both of them have stepped into these roles with ease and are already creating fantastic opportunities under the circumstances. Another new element of this school year is a seminar for all students that explores the systemic racism which plagues our country and the racial disparity in our school system, while specifically focusing on being anti-racist. This, as a part of the board's resolution to eliminate racial, economic, and linguistic disparity in our schools, has been successful so far. The Monomoy Equity Task Force has already also been launched in order to create an equitable district where everyone feels safe and supported. We as students are looking forward to helping Monomoy create equality and continue to support the Black Lives Matter movement. This August, one of our 8th grade civics classes received a designation of exceptional at the Project Citizen National Showcase, where their presentation titled Plastic Water Bottle Ban was presented. These students were able to complete the project during quarantine and hope to advocate for real change in our communities when they consider plastic waste issues. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I look forward to meeting with you all again soon.
Thank you very much, Amy. Any questions, comments for Amy before she leaves the podium? Anyone? Anybody in the Zoom room? Questions, comments for Amy? Amy, thank you very much. Knowing you personally, I'm delighted to have you here and look forward to your reports.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to the next item of business, which is public comment. Anyone from the public would like to speak? Anybody in the Zoom room? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to recognitions. Dr.
Can you hear me, Tina? Can I be heard?
We do
Charles,
have
yes.
someone, I think.
Yes, okay, Charles is here. Yes, we'll back up. I'm sorry, Joe, you had a question?
No, I was just pointing out, I saw a hand raised. that's all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. All right, so Charles, go ahead. You have the mic.
Can you hear me all right?
I can.
Okay. I want to just express some comments regarding the draft policy on school committee meetings. It's up for another first reading on the agenda this evening. I believe that many of my concerns about the initial draft policy that I expressed in my recent email to the committee members have been addressed in the revised draft that will be reviewed tonight. If I'm understanding the revised draft in tonight's packet correctly, the second public comment period of the meeting will remain in effect as per Rule 1 of the general rules for the committee's public comment period under the policy section, guidelines for public comment. I note that the draft calls for limiting the speaker to 3 minutes maximum instead of the current practice of 5, probably to rein in folks like myself who suffer from verbal diarrhea, to learn how to structure our comments with verbal efficiency.
Wow.
But it continues to allow the chair to permit the extension of this time limit, quote, in extenuating circumstances. I'd prefer the latter wording to be changed to at the discretion of the chair. Extenuating circumstances is a debatable clause and term, and you wouldn't want someone to be talking about unfair treatment of people and trying to justify what makes an extenuating circumstance versus not. I think it would be easier for the committee, in my opinion, to use the wording at the discretion of the chair in that comment. I respectfully request your consideration of that. Under Rule 5, in the same section, I'm wondering what action the chair will take with any comments longer than 3 minutes that are presented to him or her before or after the meeting, as Rule 5 calls for in the draft tonight. I think if there are comments that a member of the public believes are important for the entire committee to hear, I feel strongly that it should be guaranteed that every member of the committee will receive them. So I would respectfully suggest considering changing the wording in Rule 5 to, quote, written comments longer than 3 minutes may be presented to the committee through the presiding chair before or after the meeting. In other words, putting a responsibility on the chair that those comments are shared with all, guaranteed to be shared with all committee members. The only area of my concerns that I expressed in my letter about the draft policy remaining unaddressed is regarding the committee's ability to take and respond to questions from the public requesting clarification or correct understanding regarding something that was presented, stated, or decided at a meeting, or similarly regarding the nature of an agenda item or something in one of the attachments for the meeting that will be reviewed during the course of that meeting. I think it's a good thing to allow a member of the public to ask a question to be certain that they understand something related to the agenda for that meeting accurately, and important for the committee to clarify if there is any misunderstanding. At recent meetings, I've asked such questions on 2 occasions, and at the last meeting, another member of the public asked a question related to this specific draft policy, in fact. And in each case, the chair has stated that the committee does not take questions as a matter of practice, but then the chair did proceed to get the question answered. I think there should be something written into the policy which provide guidelines for the kind of questions that are allowed to be asked of the committee and enables the chair to respond to appropriate questions without feeling that the chair is violating the rules and guidelines of the committee in some way. In other words, I think if the public is taking time to follow the business of the school committee, attending meetings, trying to understand what's going on through the agenda, the school committee should want to make sure that they are clear in their understanding as a public, because they go out and explain things to other people out in the community. So I think the committee should be allowed to take specific questions, and certainly not any question, but something that's of a clarifying in nature, and feel comfortable, the chair should feel comfortable to be able to get the clarification so that the person goes away with a full and clear understanding of what the committee has decided, or what the matter was at hand that was discussed and debated. And with that, I thank you again, as always, for your consideration of my respectful requests and comments during public hearing period.
Thank you very much, Charles. Anybody else for?
Oh, and by the way, I'm Charles Gruska, 6 T-Berry Ave, Harwich.
Yes, get ready for that.
Follow
Town
that
meeting
rule.
Saturday, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Anybody in the Zoom room? I don't see anybody in our physical room. Okay, yes, Terry?
Just a clarification that, Charles, I commend you on the letter you sent us. Very thorough. Speaks to a lot of the same feelings I had regarding a year ago. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to comment now or when we were discussing the first reading, but in my reading of the draft from the subcommittee earlier this afternoon, I couldn't, and thank you, Charles, I couldn't find where it says the restoration of a second comment at the end of our public meetings.
Okay. So we'll, and thank you, Terry. We're going to discuss this because it is on the agenda, and we'll go in more detail in our discussion at that time. So.
Fine.
Would that be okay?
Yep.
All right. So anybody who, and Charles, I wrote down a couple things which I'm going to address when we get to that part of our agenda.
Thank you, and I would further comment that I hope I was correct in what I stated as a follow-up to what Terry presented. That was the way I read the draft that you'll be looking at tonight, that there would be at the beginning and end of the meeting, a public comment period. So if not, I'll have more to say about that in the second public comment period this evening.
Thank you very much,
I
Charles.
feel very strongly
Keep us
about
on
it.
our
Thank you.
toes. Thank you. All right, and anybody else, public comment? All right, seeing none, we're going to move into recognitions with Dr. Carpenter.
I have a few tonight. First, we would like to thank the following for their grants, donations, and support of our district. The Harwich Quilt Blank and Bayberry Quilters for their donation of cloth masks for our students and staff. The artisans made 90 masks in sizes ranging from preschool through adult, and have offered to make more when those are given out. To Jim and Mary Misert for their generous donation of $200 to the Chatham Lighthouse Fund to help support the needs of elementary and middle school aged children in need of warm clothing. To Ginny Drinkwater for her donation of camera kits, including a Nikon 80 or D80 and other camera equipment to our high school visual and performing arts program. Chatham Elementary School received a generous donation of masks from Maui Gold, approximately 1,000 of them for our students, staff, and community. Monomoy Community Services, Chatham Children's Fund, and local vendors donate an assortment of new and gently used clothing for distribution via the food pantry. Clothing and masks will be available for families on Thursday and Friday after school outside of the front of the building. The PTO donated $800 for the Chatham Elementary School to purchase shade tents. The Laptop for Kids donated 3 laptops for distribution to students to help access homework resources from home. The Cape Cod and Islands Chef Association for their donation in the amount of $500 to support Carolyn Freitas' garden kitchen classroom and culinary arts program at the high school. And finally, we'd like to thank the Friends of Chatham Waterways for their grant to the middle school in the amount of $700 to purchase 2 dissolved oxygen meters, 2 pH kits, 2 tape measurers to allow more students to participate in water quality testing.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Any comments, questions for Dr. Carpenter? Oh, thank you. Any questions, comments for Dr. Carpenter regarding recognitions? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to our first item under Section F, Reports and Discussions, the District Handbook for Monomoy Regional High School. Principal Police, welcome. And Vice Principal, yay. Mr. Alexander, thank you.
Good evening, good evening, everyone. Jen Police, principal at Monomoy Regional High School. One piece of advice that I was given when I took this role was to make sure that I delegate to my assistant principal. So David is actually taking this over as the position that Janie filled, which she was the handbook guru. So David is going to go through the changes to our handbook for 2020-21.
Perfect, thank you.
Pleasure to be here. See everybody in person, too. So in addition to the routine yearly updates of names, dates, page numbers, etc., the following student and parent handbook revisions are proposed for 2020-2021. The 2019-2020 handbook would likely need a overhaul in light of all the current changes related to the pandemic. And like our other schools in the district, we chose to keep last year's version of the handbook intact because when this is over, which will be sooner rather than later, the handbook would revert back to its original form. So the addendum takes each affected topic covered in the handbook and includes the changes in effect this year to accommodate all these adjustments that were made. We did this by doing 3 things. We provided you a link to the COVID addendum. We also provided a link to the district back-to-school plan. And then the third item was a link to the Health Services Department's webpage on the MRSD website. Topics covered, obviously, in the COVID addendum would supersede what is written in the handbook, and a copy of the addendum was sent along. And in addition, we provided hyperlinks wherever appropriate to make it convenient for folks to find it in one click. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for Vice Principal, Mr. Alexander? Anybody? Anybody in the Zoom room? Everybody good? I think we're good.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, David.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
congratulations.
I appreciate that.
Just a
Oh,
quick
hold
thing.
on, Mr. Carpenter. Go ahead,
Jen and
Superintendent.
David, I just want to remind you that we're not used to presentations from the high school less than an
Oh,
hour in
yes.
length, okay? So,
Every minute matters. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item under reports and discussions is the FY budget revision, and there is a vote required. And I think Michael is doing something else, so Superintendent, you'll take this one?
So Jim's just going to queue up a presentation that we gave this past Monday at the Harwich Selectmen's meeting, and I'll just go give some context. I'm not going to give the whole presentation. I'll sort of summarize the slides, and we'll move through it because most of them you've seen before. I think the challenge that that both of our towns have had as we deal with COVID as a school district and COVID as two municipalities is clearly, revenues are down in both of our towns to some extent. And at the same point, we have some grants that have come in for COVID relief that's helping offset some of the budget challenges that we are happening. So, Jim, if we could go to that slide 2. That's fine. All right, so if you kind of step back and say, okay, where did we start when it came to developing the FY20 budget? We started doing budget presentations in January of this calendar year. January of this calendar year, COVID was something that was happening overseas in China, but wasn't here, and so we were actually doing budget presentations both on the town side and the school side that were not taking into account what was about to happen between January and and currently here in September. So we had at the time a budget for the high school that was initially presented of $41,946,623, and we were using $670,000 of excess and deficiency to offset those budgets. Over the intervening few months, when we saw the initial impact of COVID on our towns and our ability to move forward initiatives, we decided as a school district that we needed to go and carry our share of the impact on budgets, and ultimately the assessment on the two towns. And we lowered our budget by reducing some staffing and not funding the ELA curriculum at the elementary level for this year, in part because without the ability to bring teachers together because of all this social distancing, it really wouldn't make sense to launch a curriculum if you can't put in place the necessary PD to have the curriculum effectively launch. So we went and took a vote as the school committee on April 30th that reduced our budget yet again from what it was before to the what's up there, the $41,924,432, and increased the amount of excess and deficiency that we were going to use. Then as we were getting closer to Chatham's town meeting, we lowered the budget ultimately yet again that had the full reduction of the ELA curriculum, and so we were at $41,449,432 with $850,440 in excess and deficiency that we were using. So that's what Chatham as a town voted at their town meeting in June. But Harwich's town meeting isn't happening until this coming Saturday. There's still, on the Harwich side, a budget gulf out there that needs to get closed. And in conversations between myself, the chair, and our chair, and the chair of the board, Board of Harwich Selectmen, the selectmen felt that they could go and support us reducing our budget by $140,000, which then has us reducing some on the Chatham side, and we'll get to what those numbers actually mean. So, Jim, if we can just go to the next slide. So, this just summarizes what the assessments were. So based on the Chatham town meeting vote, Harwich's assessment was going to be going up by 1.19%, which is still, I think, the lowest percentage increase of any budget since I've been here in the last 8 years. Chatham's, because of enrollment shifts, was going down by just slightly over 2%. So the next slide, Jim. One of the things I wanted to clarify when we went to talk with the selectmen, that there are challenges, costly challenges in running a school during a pandemic. One of the most challenging ones is that we are really running two parallel school systems. We have Monomoy distance learning school system that a quarter of our families have opted, and Monomoy in-person learning happening in 4 schools which 75% of our families have opted for. So there's staffing of both of those. There's added staffing that's needed to have students 6 feet apart with generally no more than 15 students in a classroom. We've had to double our nursing staffing in the buildings. We've had to make sure that the HVAC system in all of the buildings, including the 3 non-high school buildings, which are 50-plus years old, that we had those HVAC systems ready to go. And then there's technology purchases, there's PP&E that we needed. So there's a lot of things that we've had to purchase. So the next slide. We've made those purchases out of those grants, those government grants that have come in to help support the COVID costs that districts have had. So there's a coronavirus relief fund that the district has that's $389,000, this ESSER fund of $169,000, and a remote learning tech grant of just about $16,000 that have helped buffer some of these costs. Next slide. So to date, we have spent over $340,000 of those funds just on tangible things like protective gear, cleaning supplies, HVAC maintenance, plexiglass that you've seen in the library and throughout our classrooms, additional student Chromebooks, just a lot of different things that we need just to run a school with these added layers that you need to protect staff and students during a pandemic. So next slide, Jim. One of the misconceptions that I wanted to straighten out too for the board is that there was a belief that since our schools have been closed, and I using air quotes around closed since March, that we don't need to fund our capital line in our budget. So there was a suggestion by some to just reduce that capital line. I just wanted to clarify what was in that capital line. And that capital line's main things are maintenance of our facilities and technology purchases. So next slide, Jim. So when it comes to technology, it's those technology purchases that the district has been doing that has positioned us to lead the way when it comes to distance learning this past spring, but also in providing the instruction that we're doing now both for those students that are in the 1/4 Monomoy distance learning program, 1/4 of our students, and also this 2-way streaming that's happening at the high school. So as it stands now, the district is providing the most in-person learning of any school district out there in this region, and that's something we can be proud of. The other thing that's different is that we've invested in maintaining proactively our HVAC systems. So we're not like the 2 adjacent school districts that have buildings in the same era. So I think people initially looked at the picture in the bottom left, and it's like, oh, that's Harwich Elementary School. No, that's not. That's Wixon and Dennis, but again, built in that same era. But it's the difference between proactive maintenance versus not maintaining, and then you have these HVAC issues that create situations where you're not open during a pandemic. The other thing that we wanted to clarify is that we are our own municipality. And as our municipality, we need to go and develop reserves for the long-term fiscal stability of the municipality of Monomoy Regional School District. At present, we only have about 7% of our annual budget in these, we'll call them, sort of long-term stability accounts, like in our case, excess and deficiency, stabilization, OPEB. If you look at those similar accounts for the town of Chatham or Harwich, which would be their free cash stabilization and OPEB, they have 26%, 23% of their annual budget in those reserves. Because I think oftentimes when, when it comes to how do we balance out our budget on the school or on the town side, it's like, oh, well, the school has $2 million in excess and deficiency. We could just use that. And the important thing to understand is we need that too, and we need that to help offset budgets. And we are using $850,000 of that $2 million excess and deficiency reserve to help support both of our towns during this fiscal crisis. So we met with the finance subcommittee, and Michael and I made a recommendation to them to meet Harwich where they were recommending, which is this $140,000 to cut our assessment towards them. If we're cutting $140,000 in Harwich, we need to cut our assessment that Chatham has already approved by $48,000. So the total reduction that I'm recommending and that the Finance Subcommittee has supported is a $188,298 reduction in our budget, which would then revise the assessments and lower the assessments for the two towns. It becomes a total assessment increase for Harwich of only 0.66%, and it becomes a total assessment decrease in Chatham, again because of the enrollment differentials, of a negative 2.62% increase. The overall budget increase this year over last is a 1.25% budget increase, and we are significantly increasing our amount of excess and deficiency to support the two towns, going from $300,440 last year to the $850,440 this year. So that's the presentation in a nutshell, and I know that Michael was with the Finance Committee while this meeting was started in Harwich. We gave this presentation to the Harwich Selectmen. They unanimously supported our budget with these revisions. And do you have an update from the Harwich
Yes.
FinCom, Michael?
Yeah, so I just spoke with I just attended the Finance Committee meeting, and they voted to support this budget unanimously.
Oh,
people who were
wonderful.
there, all but one member was there, and they all voted in favor of this budget.
Okay, thank you so much.
So
All right.
our recommendation to the board is to support this budget too and vote for it, and then it would have the school committee, finance committee, and selectmen all supporting the budget at this Saturday's town meeting on our football field.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to open it up for discussion and questions before we actually move into a vote. Does anybody have questions regarding the presentation, the comments, the proposal? Anyone? I'm seeing nothing. Joe, go ahead.
I first wanted to see if I could unmute. And being able to do that successfully, I can raise a question. Dr. Carpenter, on the excess and deficiency, where do you see the future of that use in the next year or two? I think the idea that the excess and deficiency of the district is really for the use of the district. I think that idea is in the rear view mirror by now. what do you see as the financial impact if the current trend continues?
Good question, Joe. So, first of all, just to, to give everybody, like my sort of quick primer on excess and deficiency. So, at the end of any fiscal year, you're going to have some unexpended funds, and there are, when you budget, you need to budget certain lines conservatively. You need to budget your staffing conservatively, slightly conservatively. You need to budget your insurance line slightly conservatively, so that you have you have some wiggle room if you have staff that get married and move from an individual plan to a family plan during a year, or you need to budget for staff to take college courses that's in the contract, and if they don't use that money, then it can go, it's left at the end of the year, and that unexpended money rolls each year into this excess and deficiency reserve that gets certified, and once certified can be used in the future fiscal year. So I'm losing track now. I think I've been in a regional school district for about 20 years, and with budgets relatively as large as ours, and almost about $300,000 in any given year tends to roll into excess and deficiency. So when we were using $330,000 in the past year, last year, that's sort of almost a stable amount that you can use budget cycle after budget cycle. If excess and deficiency grows, you can look for things that you might spend out of it, but you ideally want to think about things that are one-time purchases, because once the money's spent, it's gone from your reserve until it slowly builds over time. So, so when we started the regional school district 7 years ago, we had, or actually now 8 years ago, we had zero. It's a new school district, no reserves. And Katie Isernio and I, over those years, had slowly grown this during the budgeting process. And when we would have monies that would come in, either unexpended monies, and in some cases in the recent years, there have been state monies that have come in after the budgeting process that's rolled into the excess and deficiency. So it has gotten to the point in the last couple of years where it has reached just over 5%. And one of the things that has to happen with excess and deficiency in a regional school district is anything above 5% automatically has to go back to the towns when you're calculating the assessment. So there's some money, if it's over 5%, that has to go back. But typically, our goal has not been to have it at 5%, but we have, I think when we were launching into the school district, and I think for Sharon and Terry and Nancy, who were here back then, I think our goal was to get up to about 4%, 7 years out, and we got to 5% 7 years out. So we're right around where we want to be. And getting to Joe's ultimate question, so we'll see this naturally increase each year, and we'll see us offsetting the town's budgets each year with it. But there are some purchases that we know we want to make, and one of the things that we had talked about this past budget cycle is using excess and deficiency to purchase either a piece or a whole ELA curriculum, which would be, again, a one-time purchase. I think if we're looking out into the near future when we're developing this next year's budget, I think after we understand what the financial realities are of COVID, for us, I would love to see us, again, when we're developing the FY22 budget, look towards excess and deficiency to purchase that ELA curriculum, or at least to heavily offset the purchase of an ELA curriculum that, again, is a one-time purchase. It makes sense out of an excess and deficiency type account. Sorry, Joe, a lot longer answer than what you might have needed.
That's a Joe kind of answer. Any other questions, comments, anything before we move into a vote? Terry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add on for all of us as a member of the Monomoy Regional Subcommittee on Finance, I find it, first of all, I think it's a critical stage in both municipal governments as well as our school department. That being said, and partially a major because of the pandemic, I see this as a rainy day or deluge account. That number 140, which doesn't represent the surplus beyond that to satisfy the needs fairly around Chatham, that 140,000 and change that we are assisting the municipal side of Harwich because of their shortfall represents about the same percentage of what our Harwich donation towards the region is, about a third. So to me, and it was dramatically lower than the initial number that was being requested, I find that to be, under the circumstances, to be a very fair way to create this fiscal partnership. Plus, it's my birthday, so I figured I'd say that.
Yes. Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
If I could just add one quick clarity on why we can be in a position to reduce our budget by $188,000 and not impact programmer staffing, because we have to keep in mind we are partly into the fiscal year. One of the things that we are doing this year that is we'll call it a temporary thing, and can do it because of the unique nature of this year. At the moment at the high school, we have a third of the student body is remote on any given day, and a quarter of the student body above and beyond that is remote on any given day, so that instead of having the 680 high school students that are on paper supposed to be in this building, we only have about 330 students in the building at any given time. Because of that, we looked at it that we don't have a need at the present to replace the retirement of Janie Girolamo, who was one of the 2 assistant principals. So we have 1 assistant principal's salary that we're not using this year that gets us part of the way there. And if the board remembers, we offered to our staff a transitional incentive, like an early retirement incentive. We didn't have a huge number of takers of it, but the staff that did take it, we hired, on large part, less expensive staff that came in on the other side. So we had more senior people leaving, less expensive staff coming in. The combination of those 2 really have allowed us, to do this without impacting other things in terms of staffing and program for this year.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? All right, seeing none, could I have a motion to accept the FY21 budget as being re-proposed? Nancy? We're having to stare off.
I move to approve the updated FY21 budget in the amount of $41,261,134, which breaks down to a Harwich assessment of $26,820,046, a Chatham assessment of $8,899,195, for a total assessment to the towns of $35,719, no, holy criminy. Total assessment of $35,719,241.
Thank you. Could I have a second,
I would
please?
second.
All right, Terry seconded. So we're going to do a roll call vote, and we'll start in our Zoom room. Joe?
Joseph Osceola, yes.
Thank you. Sharon? And if you're having difficulty still with your mic, just do a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Spacebar.
Sharon, if you can't unmute, just give us a, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aye.
Thank you. Jackie?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and that's unanimous. All right, thank you very much.
Do we need, Madam Chair,
Yes,
do we need to revote the one line item that's updated?
that's a very good question. I do not know. I'm going to ask you, Nancy, or do it, Michael.
For the breakdown of the budget by function code,
Mm-hmm.
do you normally vote it by function?
When we vote the budget initially, we
Yeah, then
do
that
it
would be
by,
great, if you could do that.
Okay.
do I need to do them all, or can I just update the
Just
one?
Update the one.
Thanks. Good answer, good answer. Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve the updated line item for category 2,000 instruction and salaries to a new number of $19,108,286. All of the other categories, line items are the same.
Okay, thank you. So Nancy's made the motion. Could I have a second?
Second?
All right, Jackie seconds, and we'll need to go around and do roll call again. Joe, we'll start with you.
Joseph Osceola, yes.
Thank you. Sharon?
Yes.
Thank you. Jackie?
Yes.
Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's unanimous. Thank you, Nancy. All right, moving on to opening day report. Superintendent?
Yes, so I'll preface this, I'm just going to talk about the first 5 days, not what happened after the first 5 days, so we can keep it upbeat and positive. So, this could be, participatory, we could have Mary chime in on this one. So you'll want to unmute Mary. So, I think, Mary, can you share Cheryl Hoffman's assessment of how we opened this year?
Best first week of school ever, with or without COVID. And Cheryl is one of our administrative assistants who's been at Harwich Elementary, not quite sure how many years, but probably close to 10. And I have to agree with her. It was just beautiful. The children came off the buses and out of their parents' cars with their masks on, acting, like it was just second nature. And the staff was so prepared after having had those 10 days. Our distance learning classrooms are up and running, and everything has been calm, peaceful. The school is just bright and shining and so clean, and it's really just been remarkable, I guess is the only way to say it. It's just been thrilling to watch everything, all of our efforts and preparation by the staff and that went in over the summer to have paid off so nicely for the children.
So I think Cheryl Hoffman's assessment, best start of the school year ever with or without COVID. I think really, if you sort of go to each one of the buildings, I think there's that similar thread out there. And even if you go into my office area, typically this time of every school year, the phone is ringing off the hook on bus challenges, bus challenges, bus challenges, bus challenges. And I have to publicly thank every parent who stepped up to go and support us getting the density off of the buses to go and have the spacing that we needed. There's just all the partners, the community partners that have stepped up to have drop-offs happen differently. It has been very smooth from that, from that standpoint. If you're a fly on the wall in our little administrative retreat this summer, my reminder to all of the principals is I don't want us to become that Georgia school with the students swarming down the hallway, no masks, and you walk through any one of these buildings and the kids are wearing their masks, they're kids, but they're spacing themselves out really nicely, and it's just been amazing. You know, I had all these nightmares on what it could look like, and from my office, I look down behind the middle school, and after fifth graders go out to recess, I'm watching them sort of on their own, orderly walking back into the building, wearing masks, and it's going really well. So I want to give some special praise to 4 people who I think pulled off a minor miracle, and those are the team of Adam O'Shea and Abby Dudley at the middle school, and Jen Police and David Alexander here at the high school. You have to keep in mind that all 4 of them are brand new to their roles. We had a deadline for families of August 12th to let us know what form of learning would you like, distance learning, in-person learning. So it was August 13th that they all got the green light to schedule your buildings, put kids in classes, and it happened, and it happened smoothly. We see in the newspaper other school districts still struggling to figure out how to schedule kids into their classes given the challenges we have. I just can't say enough about the challenge that 4 new administrators at our middle school and at our high school had, and how well they stepped up to meet this challenge and make it happen. So again, a very smooth start to the year. It's never perfect. There's a couple bus glitches that we've been fixing, and there's a couple class scheduling issues, but it has gone really well. And then under the superintendent's report, we'll talk about the evening of day 5.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Anybody? Nope. All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to the next item, which is subcommittee chairs. In your packet, you have a page, it's actually page 10 from our school committee handbook. And if anybody needs to find the handbook, it's actually on our website if you go under school committee. But under subcommittees, liaisons, and representatives, I think it's number two. The committee chairperson, subject to approval by the committee, will appoint the subcommittee chairperson and its members. So a couple of things that just in attending some of our subcommittee meetings, and I guess a couple of questions that came my way, was us wondering out loud, should we be having either a subcommittee chair or a point person, just to kind of make sure that the committee is meeting as it should? Is there somebody taking notes for the minutes, maybe facilitating the meeting? And so I think it might be helpful, and I would like to recommend, just for our 4 standing subcommittees, which would be budget, finance, superintendent evaluation, negotiations, and policy, I'd like to recommend that we have a chairperson or a point person, whatever you want to call it, just for each of these committees, and their role is to basically just make sure that you're meeting as you should. The meetings are getting posted, which Leah does a great job with, but just making sure, taking the notes, because we do need to be getting Leah the minutes for these subcommittee meetings, and facilitating the meeting. So just wanted to put that on the table. So discussion or questions? Any comments in the Zoom room?
Yes.
Sharon?
So I think that's an excellent point. I think I'm on the Superintendent Evaluation and Policy Committee. I can't speak about the others, but when we get going, it's so easy to forget to have the structure, to take minutes and all of that. I think this is a really good point.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Joe, did you have a comment? I saw something flash up in the Zoom chat. No comment? And you've got a very nice haircut, Joe. Anybody else? Yes, Meredith.
I just want to say that I support this because I think it would be nice to just know who's going to present when we come to our combined meetings.
Thank you. That's another point too. Thank you. So with that being said, any other discussion? Jackie?
I just had a question and a comment.
Okay.
One, is this something we can talk about at our workshop? Because I feel like we also were going to talk about the committee handbook. And also, my comment would be, I feel like we've talked about this before, like a while ago, structuring our subcommittees, and I don't know if anybody else recollects anything, but it definitely has been a topic before, and I couldn't tell you why we never proceeded with it.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm not aware, I mean, Meredith and I being the newest ones,
Yeah.
I'm not aware of that, but yeah, absolutely. Nancy?
Yeah, I think that it was a conversation at some point, and it's probably a good idea, I should say probably, it is a good idea to make it more structured. I think that over the years, what I have noticed is that somebody kind of just takes on that role at the meeting at the subcommittee meetings without it being formal. So it kind of evolved, but in putting it into a more structured format and a dedicated person is probably the right way to go.
Okay, thank you. Terry?
I agree with everybody. I think it's probably long overdue. I do think in reflecting back on the financial subcommittee and the, staying with that, usually the subcommittees, the superintendent is with us, and it seems appropriate that on occasion, primarily the finance subcommittee, that the superintendent carries the day and highlights any references to what had happened the previous few days, and then that generates a conversation in some direction. However, that being said, I too would agree to have volunteers or whatever, how it works out, that there'd be a designated person to conduct the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? We'll go to Joe and then Sharon.
Just a technical point. At the last meeting, it was very difficult to hear from Mr. Russell. I'm very appreciative that Terry, you're coming through loud and clear today. And just quickly for the others, if it may be moving the microphone a little closer to you, but because the mask is interrupting the audio, and it's at least for me in my advancing years, it's a little harder to hear you. So if the mics maybe were a little closer, that might help us, or help me in any event. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Sharon? And you're on mute. And unfortunately, I don't think we can unmute her. So if you're on your Zoom, looking at your Zoom screen, Sharon, down at the bottom left corner is a mute button, the very left bottom corner. And if you just click on that, it should open your mic. And unfortunately, we can't do it on our end. Okay, so Leah's going to send you a note that says asking you to unmute, so I think if you click on that, it will help. Okay, so here's what I'm going to ask you to do, Sharon. If you would like to put a comment in the chat box, Joe, could I ask you to read it to me? If that would be okay? Or yeah. Thank you, Joe.
The same functionality for chat as unmute, so she just puts her mouse down on the bottom of the screen in her Zoom window.
Okay.
There should be menu options that pop up for her.
Okay, it looks like she's typing.
Isn't there an option to push the space bar?
I don't know. So for those of you watching at home on live feed, we've just taken care of some technical issues. Thank you for your patience. While we're doing that, all right. So while we're doing that, let me just ask this. and then we'll hopefully get Sharon's question here. So do you, and I can't remember who said it, I think it was someone, do we want to take this up next? Now, my understanding of our workshop is that I don't know if we can take an official vote at our workshop because it's not a public meeting. So I think we'll have to do it here tonight. We could talk about it next week and pick our people, which might have been your suggestion, or not yours, okay.
No,
So, go ahead.
it was my suggestion. I think that, well, I think that in each subcommittee, that subcommittee would pick their,
Okay.
their chair, or whatever you want to call it. But I was thinking at the workshop is where you would talk about and develop the roles of them and what the, you know what I mean? And the
Okay.
structure of what that subcommittee is going to look like. Then you'd bring it back here with, this is what we as a school committee put together, and now as a group, we're going to vote on, this is what we want.
Okay, how does everybody feel about that? Is everybody okay? So if we take this dialogue into our workshop next week, getting a bit more clarity, then we bring it back and we'll add this to our next agenda in a couple of weeks for more discussion and a vote. Everybody good with that? Looks like, what about in the Zoom room? Would you be okay with that? Joe?
Yes, just be careful and clear that we do not deliberate in a retreat meeting. We can't do that. I'd also mention quickly, Sharon's voting has to be audible, not just a thumbs up. And if I think she's going to the phone, which has been very helpful in the past, because she can sometimes connect with us by phone.
Okay, thank you. And Sharon, it looks like your mic is now open. Can you say something?
Yes, oh,
Okay,
well,
there we go.
first of all, I just got this new device at 5, so, so it's gonna take a little bit. But the only reason I was trying to speak is because when Jackie spoke before, I couldn't understand, it was very muffled, and I didn't want to mess what was being said. Everyone else I got, that's all.
Okay, thank you. So what I think I'll just make this recommendation, because I hear what Joe is saying, that we can't deliberate. But what we can do is make this part of our goal setting, I believe, and we can just better define these roles, and then we can bring it back. Does that sound good? All right, so we're going to move this over, Leah will move this over to our next agenda and bring it back for a vote. All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item 5, substitute rates. Would this be Michael?
I can manage this one.
Okay.
Yes, so, yeah, I am a biology major by training, but back in the 80s on SNL, there was an actor comedian, Donald Novello, who had a character called Father Guido Sarducci. And one of his skits was a 5-minute university. And it was everything that a undergraduate remembers, I think, a year after they've graduated. And one of the pieces of that skit was economics 101. And he said, it's all about supply and demand. So this next thing on substitute pay rates is all about supply and demand, and I will be sharing everything I learned from Father Guido Sarducci back in the 80s. So at the moment, we have most of our subs that were working for us last year, we actually still have subs. The challenge that we're finding with operating schools in an era of COVID is we actually need more subs. So if we just take the high school alone, with one student positive and the quarantining that has happened around that student, we have 8 subs that we need above and beyond the subs that we've had. And we have one other teacher at Harwich Elementary School who is quarantining. So there's, so technically we have a need for 9 subs above and beyond what would be typical in any given year. And knock on wood, we don't need more subs than that until those teachers are back. So, so we need to retain the subs we have, attract more subs, and we have had a thoughtful plan that Katie and I walked the school committee through, wanting to have our substitutes get up to that $15 an hour by 2022. In talking with Michael and Mark and I, we feel that the district urgently needs to jumpstart that and get to $15 an hour now. And then what we have recommended is that we offer a bonus for subs that continue, that continue to sub for us. So, so to have a bonus for just this year, that if you subbed for us for 30 days, there'll be a $500 bonus, and if you, or if it's for an instructional assistant, if you sub for us for 30 days, there'll be an additional bonus to have people have some consistency there. So our recommendation is that we increase our sub rates for instructional assistants to $14.25 an hour, and for our teachers, subs to $15 an hour, and to have those bonuses for just this year to, again, support this notion of supply and demand, that the demand is high out there, not just here, but it's going to be high in every school district, and I think we have to recognize the economic realities. Michael's done a little assessment at the bottom of what will this actually cost us in the end, and has gone back in and looked at subs that have worked for us in the past, what percentage of them actually do 30-day chunks at a time. So, so we have a feel for how much the bonus would cost us above and beyond. So if you have any questions on the numbers, I'll defer to Mike. Michael, if you have any questions on supply and demand in Economics 101, I will share with you everything that Father Guido Sarducci has taught me.
All right, thank you. Questions, comments? Sharon.
Yes, so my question is, if we move it to $15 an hour, do you feel like we will have, that will be competitive enough with other districts? I'm sure every district's in the same situation. Do you think that that will be competitive enough to get the subs we need?
I would say yes. In fact, I think if we explain to people at the moment people are getting, what is it, $90 a day?
Yes.
So for a substitute teacher, it's $90 a day. And I think that that's probably the going rate around. What we're saying is, if you come in, we'll pay $15 an hour. If you come in routinely and earn this bonus, that the $15 an hour plus the bonus would actually translate into folks that want to kind of commit to us at a daily rate of about $120 an hour, a day, which is I think very competitive. And I think what we're trying to also think about is, I think there are some people who are doing certain jobs in the area that might look at a solid $15 an hour with the chance to have this bonus and be up more like 17.5 plus an hour, that might be enough to actually pull in additional talent.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Oh, Nancy?
I must have just assumed, and that is never a good idea, and I won't say why. The 30-day incentive, that's not 30 days in a row. That's 30
No.
days over the course of the year.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Because normally once they get, if it was 30 days in a row,
It'd be long-term.
normally that'd be a long-term
Right, and
substitute, and that's a whole different pay scale. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this is an incentive for
Yeah.
just for the rest of this year to be a regular
To keep
sub.
coming back.
Excellent.
People that are here for, taking over a class for 30 days, the policy is we
Long-term
offer them
subs.
Bachelor Step 1.
Right.
Which is more than this.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a
yes,
comment. I
Tim.
think it's well worth it. Absolutely, under the circumstances.
Okay. Jackie, did you have something?
I was gonna make a motion.
Okay, so let's move into a motion.
Joe, can you hear me okay? Gonna take that as a no.
Joe, can you hear Jackie? Yes.
Barely.
Barely.
Move it closer.
Gonna put it under?
Joe, how's that? Okay. I moved
Heard
to,
that.
I was look at the Whisper 2000. All right. I move to approve an increase to the rate of pay for substitutes as follows. For teacher assistant substitutes, 6.5 hours a day. New proposed rate, effective immediately, of $14.25 an hour, with a COVID incentive of $400 after 30 days. Teacher substitutes, 7 hours a day. The new proposed rate, effective immediately, of $15 per hour, with a COVID incentive of $500 after 30 days.
Second.
All right, so Nancy seconded, Jackie, yep, okay. So second came from Nancy. So we're going to do a roll call vote, and we'll start in the Zoom room. Sharon, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Thank you. Joe?
Joe Osceola in favor of the motion.
Thank you. Jackie?
Aye.
Nancy, Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move into Section G, Subcommittee Reports, first reading. So this is our school committee meeting policy that is coming back as a first reading because there were major revisions done to it. Could I, Jackie, do you mind if I ask you to kind of kickstart us to just highlight some of the changes?
Well, I can try. Where do we want to start?
Actually, you know what? I've got a yellow copy from, do you want
Yeah,
me to
'cause
run through?
I don't have the yellowed copy, so
Yeah.
I made notes of what Charles was talking about,
Okay.
but that was it. So do you want to?
Let me start with the yellow
Okay.
version. And the yellow version that I'm referring to, this was my version as I was taking notes last time. So let me just kind of bring you up to, based on our last meeting, some of the things that were suggested. And I don't know if it exactly matches up to the printed copy here, unfortunately, but.
And Tina, if you want to lead me off and then I can talk about it, that's fine too.
Agenda
whatever you want.
format. Under agenda format, there was a paragraph 3, any school committee member. And I think what we did was break that down, if I'm remembering, gosh. Yeah, I have a note, reword this for clarity. So I think we took paragraph 3, we decided that we would bullet, because I think it was too confusing. And so we ended up bulleting, which you now see 1 through 8. And then we added a new paragraph from page 4. So if you can remember the swapping of the paragraphs we were talking about. And then during public comment period, it was the paragraph that says the agenda will also provide for time. I think what we did is just bulleted all of this stuff. Does that help, Jackie?
Yeah, so I don't even have to say anything. All we did was break up the paragraph and bullet them because Sharon had suggested that there be more clarification and kind of subtitles to each section. So instead of titling something, because we felt that that might limit us or be too difficult to actually frame what was in that section, we would number it so that each number pertained to a specific item in that paragraph. So basically it's for ease of reading and to locate, to address something. One of the other big changes is that we changed, per Joe's request, anywhere where it said citizen to person or persons, because we felt that that encompassed everyone best. And let's see, what else do we have?
And then under public comment
Yep.
at school committee meetings, there was a reference that, there was, in the original version, we were talking about a sign-up. And we decided we didn't need the sign-up. So I think we removed that.
We omitted sign-ups, and I can address the part about,
And this is where we did add the second public comment back in.
yeah, where did I have that?
Yes.
Okay.
And actually,
That's on page 5.
And I know, Terry, I think it was you that was looking for that. So if you look on page 5, paragraph, or number 1, public comment shall be for a period of 15 minutes and shall generally follow the opening of the meeting and the closing of the meeting. So that's where the 2 public comment sections are addressed.
Yes.
We had a lot, we went back and forth on the amount of time, and I think the general consensus was that even though we're bringing it back to 3 minutes, that it truly is at the discretion of the chair, and that we just have never felt the necessity to ask someone to stop talking. I think that we've always been pretty forthright with allowing someone to talk and share their comments, so we didn't really feel that it was too constraining to just state that timing in there. And we were very careful to, most things, so that they didn't look as definitive, made them at the discretion of the chair. So in my mind, that makes things more flexible in this policy. And then, let's see, Charles, you had a question, and I agree with you. Page 4, number 2, speakers will be allowed up to 3 minutes to present their material and must begin their comments by stating their name and city, town. The presiding chair may permit extension of this time limit. I think it should just be of this time limit, period.
Yes, Nancy.
While we're on that line, I think using the words at their discretion, because that seems to be the
The
verbiage.
theme?
At their discretion instead of, so the presiding chair may permit the extension of this time limit at their discretion.
Perfect.
Jackie, you're making notes of these?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would agree that the wording at the chair's discretion, I do think, I agree with that wording, so I wasn't quite catching exactly where there was something else written, but we'll look for that.
I also was going to comment that I think that on that same page, number 5, where it says written comments longer than 3 minutes may be presented to the presiding chair before or after the meeting, I kind of feel like we don't need that, like we should just omit that section, because when you're telling someone that they have 3 minutes to talk and they may be able to talk longer at the discretion of the chair, then I don't really think that we need to bother a public speaker to present their comments before or after, because I often think that sometimes the comments aren't prepared. So I just, just like we're not having them sign in, I just don't find that necessary. And, I mean, anything longer than 10 minutes should be a presentation anyway, and that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would almost omit number 5.
All right, so how does everybody feel about omitting number 5? Sharon?
I can't hear anything Jackie's saying, but my suggestion is that all of these comments just get sent in writing to one of us. You're on that committee, so maybe that could be sent to you. And then at our next subcommittee, that we look at that, because it sounds like some good ideas. I can't hear all of them. And we could just take it back up in our policy and come back with that revision.
Okay.
That's what we're doing right now, Sharon.
Okay, thank you.
And it sounds like we just might have an audio issue too. Joe, you had your hand up, and then I'll come to Terry.
Just a request that as we are moving now from summary of changes and we're initiating discussion, it might be a little formal, but I think ultimately it could be useful if we just organize the discussion section by section. Is there discussion on the general overview, then is there a discussion on executive session? Just move that way rather than bounce around between the different sections.
That makes sense.
We could even vote that way if that's a preference as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
I vote Joe chair of the policy subcommittee.
But it makes sense, Joe, but since we're almost at the end, let me just say the other big change that we made, I think, was under guidelines for public comment. There was a huge paragraph. It was another paragraph move, basically. It was Meredith's suggestion that we took, it was a big paragraph that we ended up moving out of guidelines for public comment and moving it over to agenda format as paragraph number 4.
We just moved it because it didn't make any sense.
Exactly. So we
Right.
just ended up swapping spots. So that's pretty much the changes that, from the last meeting that we took to this. Terry?
I thank everybody in the subcommittee for the revisions, and I didn't catch, thanks, Jackie. I didn't catch on that item 4, I guess, adding
found it for you.
the second comment, because I think that's valuable. As I looked at the past year, I didn't even know we were on trial anyways, as far as was that a good idea? And absent the fact that the rationale for eliminating it, to me, didn't make any sense, especially in the light of the fact that for the last 6 months, we've been under house quarantine, and the public has not been able to make a move in coming, not that they probably would anyways. However, I think it's our idea to, or I think it's our goal. Someone once said, well, it is our meeting. That's true, but all of us have been elected to represent the kids and the parents and the taxpayers, so it's their meeting too. That's my feeling. So the only thing, all the suggestions I think Charles made, as well as I was echoing that I think to go back to the original idea, along with all of this Mass School Committee recommendation, I think is a good thing. The only thing I'd add is, because we have never had to worry about someone coming and speaking to the point where it's over time, I would recommend that we keep the 5 minutes. To me, 3 minutes is an awfully quick thought in your head, especially for the public who maybe they're not used to coming to speak their mind. So I would suggest the subcommittee take a look and just revert back to where it says speakers will be allowed 5 minutes under the discretion of the chair. Other than that, I agree with everything that's been said as far as revisions.
So let me make one comment, and then I'll go to Jackie. So I think it's important for everybody to know that in researching this, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, their statement is it's a school committee meeting in public. So technically, we don't even have to have public comment. That is a choice that each school committee can make. But according to MASC, it's a school committee meeting in public. It's not a public hearing. With that being said, MASC had recommended the 15-minute and the 3-minute in the policy subcommittee. We had a good debate about this, and we felt that the 15 minutes and the 3 minutes was sufficient at the discretion of the chair. So I don't think it's our intention to ever cut anybody off, but we also wanted to just have people really think about what are the key points I need to make in 3 minutes. And then if you need extra time at the discretion of the chair, I think we're willing to do that. But that was our thought. We were going with the recommendation from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, 15-minute and 3-minute, really with the intention of having people to come with their thoughts. And Terry's right, sometimes people pop up and they have an idea right then and there, but we really did want for people to come and boom, 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 have their points made, and the chair can always extend it. Jackie?
Yeah, just on that same topic, we talked about it a lot, and one of the points that I had actually offered up was that you can always give more time, but you can't take time away. And if you have a lot of speakers that you want to hear, it's more advantageous for us to have a smaller limit that we can extend rather than fewer people. And then, yes, you could look at it and go, we'll give them 30 minutes or give them 20 minutes, as an overall, but we're just trying to give it some guidelines. And with this, we feel like we can always give it more. I mean, Charles always gets whatever let's pick on you, Charles.
I don't think we've ever cut Charles off.
Charles
Yes.
never gets cut off
Yes.
because he's usually one of the only public speakers that we have.
Yeah.
But we've had meetings where there's been quite a few public speakers about something that's really pertinent in our community, and that's when having 3 concise minutes of your points is important so that everyone can be heard. And I think that's kind of where we were coming from, not to limit the opportunity, but to know we have the flexibility and to give it some structure.
Yes, thank you. Terry?
I think, Jackie, at least you proved my point. I agree that you folks, in looking this over, probably spent a lot of minutes talking about it. Well, that same logic applies to once or twice or 3 times a year when the public comes to a meeting. and wants to express either positive or a negative concern they may have in their mind. I don't see any reason why you'd want to say you've got 3 minutes. Nor would I want to be the chair to say, excuse me. But I'm going to give you another couple. I think it's worth at least an open, transparent thing to leave it at 5, because 5 minutes is a reasonable time to me, and none of us are going to burn the midnight oil saying 5. 3 to me just seems to be a little bit tight with the very people that we want to be able to come and share what their issue is. So I
Okay.
would recommend that it stay at the 5.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Sharon?
I totally agree with Terry, because I think that there are a lot of us that sometimes have difficulties being succinct. We're trying to get our idea out. If we've come prepared with it all written down, like it was being turned into an English teacher, sure, that could easily be done in 3 minutes, but I think that the comment that Charles made a while back was, if we want to hear from the public, which we hardly ever do, we need to look like that. The horror would be is if we did cut people off at a 3-minute time, and we started doing that because it was in our policy, I think would be so detrimental.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Joe, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Well, we've definitely slid into discussion on the policy as a whole, so I'll make a comment or two. I personally have very little interest in what the Massachusetts Association of School Committees says or recommends on anything. But they do recommend 3 minutes in speaking, and in that point, I think they're right. I think they're correct to do it. And I say this as someone who doesn't typically feel the need to follow any of their guidelines. Also, I did also a little investigation on this, as someone else said. I just looked around at about a dozen school committees at different parts of the state, and 11 of the 12 use the MASC guidelines. Now, these were, it's only a dozen. They're chosen at random, but most every towns that I came across seems to follow the MASC guideline, and I think it's a good one. I'm imagining a future meeting where there's some controversy. We have 50, 60 people in the room. Different people will want to speak. The shorter time allows for more voices to be heard. I think you can say what you need to say in 3 minutes, and I am well aware that I'm someone who has been guilty of not always following that guideline, but it is a good one for the public at least. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Superintendent?
I don't know if it would make sense to have a clause in there that I've seen even at our own school committee meetings or select board meetings that we've gone to, where you have a lot of the public coming to talk about one topic that at some point, if the points that are being made start to become redundant, at times the chair chimes in to say, are there members of the public who have sort of new things, just to make sure that that the committee is hearing all the breadth of perspective out there within within the time frame that you want to have, and sometimes I think it's helped chairs that I've seen limit the length, so that you're not hearing 20 people come up and saying the exact same thing over and over again, but and that's that's going for either 3 minutes at a time or 5 minutes at a time. But I think to have some little clause that allows leeway for the chair to steer it a little bit too.
Okay, thank you. Nancy?
I don't really have that big of a feeling of a 3-minute to 5-minute time frame. Because again, being at the discretion of the chair, I honestly can't remember a time where we've ever said, I'm sorry, you've been speaking for 5 minutes, you need to stop now. What I would recommend is removing the line from our agenda and just leave the agenda to say public comment, instead of saying speakers are limited to 5 minutes additional time at the discretion of the chair. I feel like that line kind of makes it more, I don't want to say negative, by saying you're limited to how you speak. And then if a situation arises, we can say, you know, thank you very much, we appreciate your comments. You know, our school committee policy is to limit our speakers to approximately 3 minutes, something along that lines. Just a thought.
Terry?
I guess a good school committee member can argue both sides, so I'll take J, public comment. And I recall being a chair at the time when we had some fairly major issues around budget 7 or 8 years ago. And Barbara, our executive secretary at the time, I think she borrowed this from Sandwich. To me, without any public comment to those who are going to get up, that allowed us, without any heat, to point to that and say, gee, we're giving 5 minutes, rather than to surprise them because it's not there. And you say, I'm sorry, but look at our policy, it's back at the central office. So whatever we decide, I think that statement kind of clarifies it to those members who arrive as a citizen, where you hand them this and they see that.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. The other comment that I wanted to address, because it did come up in our speaker today, as well as an email that we all received, is the Q&A during public comment, the second public comment. I know it's been raised a couple of times, actually 3-4 times that I can recall, where somebody comes up to the public comment and they have a question, a clarifying question. And we did talk about this in subcommittee, but I do believe, because it keeps coming up in the public comment about this, so I think we have to have a discussion. How do you feel about the second public comment being open to somebody who wants to get up at the mic and ask a clarifying question through the chair? Now, we talked about it at policy, and I think we kind of had, it was kind of, you know, we didn't have a unanimous thought on that, but I wanted to open that up now. Jackie?
I feel like without the guideline, I'm cautious to open what could possibly be a discussion or debate when and if something is not on the agenda, or if there's already been a vote taken. I think there's just too many gray areas in there, and I think that it's traditional in my mind that because this is our business meeting, and now we're also adding a second public comment segment, that there's an opportunity at the beginning to speak, and then there's an opportunity at the end to speak, and I think our purpose was so that if there was something from the last meeting, you could address it in public comment, and if there was something during the middle of the meeting, you could address it during public comment, but we're moving away from the purpose of public comment. And if you look at the definition of what we have for public comment, that doesn't really correspond to a question and answer filling public comment. So we would have to change, I think, what the definition of public comment. Public comment is to make a comment. It's not public conversation. So I'm just saying, we gotta look at the whole document.
Okay. Nancy and then Terry.
I was just going to say that it's very difficult, because I agree with what Jackie's saying 100%, that it's a public comment period. It's not a public hearing. A public hearing is when we have our budget, and it's a conversation between the public and us, and them asking questions and us responding to them. That's a public hearing, which is a specific meeting type. These are our business meetings in which we want the public to attend, and we want the public to be a part of the meeting and make a comment at the beginning. And I agree, I wasn't exactly a huge fan of the public comment at the end of the meeting to begin with, and I've come to think it is advantageous. And it's very tricky because it can't be a question and answer period for the public to ask questions, and yet, as we've seen a couple times, there was misunderstandings from the public of what we did during our meetings, and that it's good for it to be clarified. So I don't really know how that's handled. I would actually be very interested to hear what other committees do during that, in that situation, if they want a clarifying question. I know that over the years, different chairs have handled conversations differently. There have been occasions where during the middle of a presentation, in the middle of a discussion, before or even shortly after a vote on the committee, a member of the public had a question, and the chair allowed the person to ask the question during the middle of the meeting, which I find that could be more advantageous. I don't know if it would be at the discretion of the chair, if that's allowed versus not allowed. I know the town of Chatham has kind of altered their selectmen's meetings around public comment because they allowed comments and conversations during every discussion item, and that was becoming very difficult to maintain a reasonable length of a meeting. So I don't know if I think that might be actually something we could discuss at our workshop as how we could handle it, and then bring it back as almost another policy or even an addendum to this policy. Just to kind of, or even, the policy subcommittee could do some research in terms of how it's handled in other districts, because we don't want the public to have a misinterpretation of what happened. And the rule of being a student or rule of being a teacher is if one student has the question, chances are there's going to be a lot more. And so if one of our members of the public is speaking up and asking a question, chances are there's other people who heard the same discussion and have the same question and don't understand what happened. And we don't want that misinterpretation out there. So basically, I just rambled on and said I have no idea.
Okay, thank you. Terry?
I'd just like to respond, Nancy, most of what you said. I agree with it. I think there's maybe a simple answer. First of all, with the discretion of the chair, number one. Number two, I think it's very valid that during our meetings, I might say something that someone from the audience needs to have me clarify because they didn't understand what I meant. I see that as very valid. As a matter of fact, I see it as very defensive for the chair to say, we don't have to answer any questions this evening. And that's so obvious. So there is some discretion. I think it rests with the chair as that person rotates every year to make a judgment, and I think it's worth our while to make certain that the 3 or the 10 or the 40 people sitting with us that night, if a hand is raised about, not so much, why did you vote that? But, Terry, I didn't understand that comment you made about busing, or could you clarify? I think that's a valuable moment to try to clarify, and after all, we have these packets that most of us have done a little bit of homework, more than the mom and the dad who might be here. So I would be all in favor of making certain we have the freedom to answer questions of those who are here.
Okay, Jackie and then Meredith.
Nancy, I was thinking about your clarification comment, and I was wondering if under public comment, just as Terry had mentioned that it's kind of nice for the speaker to know they have 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, that it also states, if further clarification is needed, please, somewhere on here, please contact the chair or the superintendent. I'm just thinking, let's not forget that, yeah, we're running our business meeting, but there are other ways for people to ask questions, and it doesn't always have to be in that moment or at that meeting. It can be a follow-up question. Charles comes back all the time or sends us emails. Sorry, Charles, again. He sends us emails with follow-up questions and clarification. And they're all very good and valid, but I don't know that it's something that we need to, I just don't know. I just feel like you got to have a little bit more structure. And I'm really not a structured person, but I just think for this, at the discretion of the chair, as Terry said, I think that definitely gives you the flexibility
to use it, and I know when I was a chair, I used it a couple times, and then I knew there were nights that there were lots of speakers, and there was just, it wasn't a good night to be, there was just too much going on, so it wasn't a night where you let someone talk longer, or a night where you were gonna take questions in the middle of your meeting, because you're trying to run your meeting, so it's really tough. I just feel like we've got 2 spots for public comment right now, and I almost feel like one of them is your opportunity for clarification, and the other one is your opportunity for public comment. That's kind of the way I look at it. It's in a perfect world, it's not gonna work that way, but we're now giving the public 2 opportunities, plus, like I said, they can contact, we're all public, all of our information is public, our phone numbers are public, our emails are public, the superintendent you can reach, the chair you can reach. There's definitely other avenues as well besides our meeting. And certainly the conversations with the community is ideal. And I think that we've all learned that with the Zoom meetings, it's been incredible how much more attendance we've gotten, because I think it's just more reasonable for a parent to be able to sit at their house and attend these meetings, but I don't want to get away from our business as an elected official and making sure that we're running efficiently, and I don't know, it's
Okay.
tough balance, and I threw my pen.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Meredith.
So I don't know if you can hear me. I'll talk loud. So, I think that, I think we definitely need more structure, but I wonder if there's just language that can be put together that, just clarifies if we're clarifying something. It's been a long day.
Clarity and clarification.
That it's something only that's been mentioned at our meeting, the current meeting, or that is on the agenda that has been already addressed. But that it would be done during the public comment. So I guess that would be the one at the end of the meeting, is what in my head just makes sense.
Okay. Before I move to the Zoom room, so on page 4 at the top, it says, right now it says,
I was
public
looking to word
comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It is an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. So, something, I guess we will have to continue to debate this. I know we did have a nice, robust conversation in the policy subcommittee about it. Something I just jotted down, we could put another sentence that says, however, a clarifying question may be asked during the second public comment, but only through the chair. But that is something we have to discuss. We had a mixed thought about it in the policy subcommittee, but that is something we could certainly consider. The question that Jackie raises is, I think, does it get too wild? Does it kind of get too, whoo? So we have to clarify the clarifying, yeah.
And I would also say that I think we addressed the Board of Selectmen that, I think it was last year the Board of Selectmen were here, and we were actually complimented on how our meeting was run and how our agenda was structured, and that they loved the way our public comment sections, and we had 2 at the time, ran so smoothly, because I think the Chatham Selectmen do allow, they don't anymore, but they were allowing conversation and clarification, and it just became, I think, too disruptive for them. But we got high praises for what ours did look like and run like, so.
Yeah.
We're doing something right, I guess, maybe.
Thank you. Nancy, and then anybody in the Zoom. Nancy, go.
Well, we have a lot of words in here saying at the discretion of the chair. So I think bottom line, our chair has a lot of discretion, whether it's written in our policy or not. And I think that the times that it has come up in years past and most recently in these meetings, even the Zoom meetings, where if a member of the public has a question during the second public comment, it's at your discretion if you want to answer it, or if you would say, you know what, Meredith, could you please clarify whatever, X, Y, and Z. You're right there, sorry. So I think, I don't think it's necessarily something that needs to be addressed. I think the members of the public that come to our meetings regularly know that we are more or less pretty darn flexible on what happens. And I also think that if we all of a sudden have an influx of members of the public that come to our meetings and they want to ask clarifying questions, I think it's completely up to you without putting it in a policy, and it's up to future chairs to say, you know what, she has a question she didn't understand, they say it at public comment, it's at your discretion to say, you know what, I really appreciate your question, now is not a time for us to ask questions, I'm happy to discuss it with you after our meeting, or please reach out to us via email. Or you could say, you know what, we don't normally answer questions during this time, it's a public comment, and I understand that you would like some clarification, and I think now's a good time. So I think without limiting what our rules are, and I know structure, I am actually a big structure person, and I'm saying that it might not be necessary at this because we don't have it happening all the time, it's not something we need to limit. So I think it's actually just leave it alone and let things come up. And if all of a sudden we have an influx of people showing up at our meetings and asking a ton of questions during the second public comment, I will be the first one to say, policy subcommittee, go back and put something in there, please. But I think at this point, it's unnecessary to kind of belabor it.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, hold 1 second.
I'm good.
Anybody in the Zoom room, did you have your hands up? Joe? Joe, go ahead.
I'd like to move to another point kind of inspired by what has been said today. Is that okay to do?
Yes, unless, Jackie, did you have something to say off of Nancy's
No, I'm
comment?
good.
Okay, all right. So go ahead, Joe.
If I could ask everyone to turn to page 5. It's under guidelines for public comment, item number 3. You'll notice it talks about the authority of the chair ruling people out of order, and so forth. I would just like to point out to the committee that this rule is typical of different public committees throughout the town, throughout different towns, throughout the Commonwealth, actually. It has recently been a very controversial point here on the Cape at a meeting on September 2nd in Barnstable. I think the county commission was looking at an issue of recall. There were people in the public who wanted to speak on that, and the chair ruled some people out of order for violating or failing to honor guidelines. This led to a pretty serious amount of controversy, and 2 women of color condemned the chair for procedural racism based on the utilization of this rule that we will consider adopting at our next meeting. So what I would suggest is that we don't take this too lightly and don't say, oh, well, if it didn't happen here yet, it can't happen here at all. We do have an incident in Barnstable within this month that did make front page news of the Cape Cod Times. So my suggestion is that not only the policy subcommittee members, but the school committee members as a whole, take some time to look at the Cape Cod Times of September 3rd, look at the comments by anti-racist activists who were criticizing the rules and policies of a white space environment and the procedural racism that was visited upon women of color. Take a few minutes to look into that situation and consider the policies that we're adopting so that we can, if we do choose to discuss this at our next meeting, we can discuss it fruitfully based on factual accounts and have perhaps a better conversation and discussion about it.
Okay, Thank you, Joe. And I am familiar with that incident. Sharon, did you have a comment?
I hate this policy.
Oh, I don't think so now.
Oh, okay, sorry. Anybody else? Nancy?
Just kind of more of a MASC question, I guess, but why is there two sections about public comment? Why is there a public comment at school committee meeting section? So starting on page 3, the bottom of page 3, continues on to page 4, and then there's a guidelines for public comment, starting on page 4, going to page 5. But there's a lot of redundancy. Like, for example, it talks about the speakers being allowed to speak for 3 minutes twice, once on each section. I guess, is there a need for having both of those, or can those two sections be condensed to say public comment at school committee meetings, including our guidelines or something? And put those two together versus keeping them separate?
Whatever you want.
Yeah, we can consider that.
It's one of those things where I keep looking back and forth, oh, which section am I looking at? Oh, they're both, I don't, maybe there is a distinct reason, I have no idea.
I think guidelines was before public comment at school committee meetings, and
Yeah,
then we
flipped
switched
them
it.
because somebody suggested.
So that's where our focus was like, oh, this doesn't make sense,
Right.
right, it needs to be in order. And then, public comment at school committee meetings is framing in the policy what public comment at school committee meetings is. And then for further detail are the guidelines, which is why I think you see repetitiveness. But if we rewrite it and get rid of the two sections and put it into one section, I guess we could do that and bullet it maybe, and then maybe you would never remember that there actually was a public comment section and just refer to the guidelines of public comment. And I guess I'd have to look before, so agenda format, and then it talks about public comment. It's almost like public comment, and then it should be a subcategory of public comment, maybe.
It's more, I'm sorry.
We'll look at it.
It's just more the redundancy of, there's a lot of the same information
Okay.
between the two. And I don't, if there's a reason for it, by all means. But
I think
it's.
we were pulling from not only mass, but the open meeting law. We were
Yeah.
kind of looking
okay.
at two things and trying to incorporate both of
They
them.
both have good stuff.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
they're not identical, obviously.
Right.
There's different pieces. It's just maybe combine them.
Okay.
So, Sharon, go ahead.
So, on this, I've had the difficulty in the subcommittee meeting of differentiating between someone asking to speak for the whatever it's 3 or 5 minute and making a presentation. So, I'll just ask for, the only thing that I can think of in recent time were there were 3 people that came and spoke, and they had prepared statements of what they wanted to say regarding their support for that anti-racism thing. And so would that would be called just a comment, wouldn't it? A presentation would be
Right.
about a whole different topic that we're not talking about right now.
Sharon, could I take this opportunity to clarify? So the what we mean by this, so a public comment, if somebody just has something they want to say based on an agenda, like if they're coming in at the beginning and there was something for whatever reason they wanted to speak about, and then at the end, people typically get up and talk about something along the lines of an agenda. But if it involves a person or a group wanting to make a presentation, so it goes beyond just getting up and making comments. And as an example, there was the anti-racism group that went to Nauset Public Schools and asked for time on their agenda, and they got up and made a presentation. Now, that didn't come to us in that manner. They decided to just come, they didn't ask us to do a presentation, but they just came and spoke during public comment. So that's the difference. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. And Nancy?
We did have a group come to us to request a presentation. It was the group that wanted to put the senior center on.
Ah, yes.
So they came. Sorry, I thought I had it on. The group that came to us to talk about the senior center on the Stepping Stones property, they requested a spot on our agenda through the chair and the superintendent. They came and during the middle of our meeting, made a presentation. So that's what,
Right.
just
That's
as an example that happened here.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good example. Yep. Does that make sense, Sharon?
Yes, yes, thank you, that's clear.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, I don't think we're ready yet. So I think we're safe to say this probably does need to go back again to the policy subcommittee for some more discussion, possibly some more revisions. And what I will say is next week when we meet for our workshop, if we decide, because we're getting together to talk about goals. So we might decide that one of our goals is to really look at public comment. That might be one of our goals, but we don't know. We can bring that up. So, but I think for tonight, this is going to go back to policy again, and I guess it'll appear back once more as a first read. Is that kind of what everybody's feeling tonight? All right. Do I need to clarify that? No. Yes, Terry?
Just as my final comment, it's amazing for those of us who've been here 5 years, 6, 7, 10 years, that we've gotten a public policy document regarding school committee meetings that amounts to almost 9 pages. And for some good fortune, those of us who've been sitting here for all these hundreds of hours have been able to make it through an evening meeting, because a lot of this is good stuff. It's amazing how much we've missed.
Yes, how did you miss it all? And just for a little bit of history, for anybody that's just now tuning in, I mean, this really came about because of what we're dealing with right now. I mean, we've got people on Zoom, we've got people in the room. It became clear to us that this isn't what we typically do, and we needed to put some structure. And then once we started looking at the structure, these other questions came up. So that's kind of the history behind that. All right, any other comment? All right, so we're going to move on, and that will go back to policy again. And we're still under subcommittee report. So the superintendent goals, could I have somebody from the committee report? Anybody from our superintendent evaluation committee? Make a report, please.
We did not meet this week.
Oh, okay, well, it's on the calendar. All right, so no report. All right, so we will cross that out. Moving on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, my first little thing I want to talk about is enrollment. And to put this one into context, a few weeks ago, I get a phone call from one of the Boston TV stations that wants to send a reporter and film crew down to report and do a story on the spike of enrollment that we're having. And then I get Tim Wood from the Chronicle emailing me to talk about the spike of enrollment, and I've had citizens emailing me to asking questions about the spike of enrollment, and and I keep going to my faithful assistant Leah to give me the data about our spike of enrollment. So I am here to report to you that this is the first time ever that an enrollment for the school district of being down, according to Leah's numbers today, being down 102 students is considered by some a spike. So there's clearly a misconception out there on what's happening. So I will try to explain why people think that there's a spike despite a decline. Here's the math of it, and I'm going to need some group participation because the superintendent left his glasses on his desk in Chatham, and some of these numbers are too small for me to read. So first of all, if we go back to when we started, our current 7th graders were kindergartners. So Nancy, how many Chatham 7th graders do we see on this list?
Which one, the left?
So if you go to the middle school.
39.
Nope,
Chatham, resident,
Yes.
7th graders.
22.
That's this year.
Okay, so
FY20 or FY21?
No, so 20, so we have 22, so we have 22 seventh graders.
You
If-
pointed to the wrong
Oh,
column.
that's fine. So we have 22 seventh graders 8 years ago. Now, if we look at today's Nancy, Chatham Elementary School, kindergartners,
9.
9. Okay, so 22 has slowly over time dropped down
Wow.
to 9, and it's gone up and down a little bit, but there's a trend there. And Meredith, as the Harwich person, this is where you have math. So if we go to 7th grade in Harwich, and how many we have?
This year,
Yep.
90.
Okay, so 90, and then if we look at our kindergartners in Harwich this year, we have to go and add the Chatham Elementary and the Harwich Elementary, Harwich kids.
This is tough.
We have to add who?
12.
So there's how many at Harwich Elementary?
84.
84 plus how many at Chatham Elementary?
9. So 93.
No, Harwich,
What?
What?
so 4, right?
There's 4 in Harwich.
Yeah, so,
88.
Oh,
okay,
I
so we have 88 Harwich
He's not being very
kindergartners
clear.
No.
this year.
Got it.
So we've seen a slight drop-off in enrollment in Harwich, and it's been slow and steady, and some years it's gone up a little, some years down, but we're seeing a decline in Chatham, a decline in Harwich, and the reality of the Cape is, across all towns on the Cape, we're seeing a gradual reduction. It's just, in Chatham, it's happening faster than it's happening in Harwich, and that has been the trend. So we were expecting that we were going to see somewhat of a decline in enrollment, because every year we're graduating out more kids as seniors than are coming in as kindergartners. So that attributes to a piece of the decline, but it doesn't account for 102 students. The other thing, the biggest factor in the decline is that there are some families who have chosen to ride out the pandemic doing homeschooling. So families that choose to homeschool, they email us. I forward the emails to Mark Smith, and Mark Smith works with the family, and they submit a homeschool learning plan that that if it gets approved, they're doing homeschooling. I believe we have an additional, as of today, we have an additional 68 it's 6, so it's total, so it's
Plus 55.
So additional 55 homeschoolers this year over the previous year. So you take a slight enrollment decrease, and then you add to that, 55 additional kids that have gone out to homeschool. That's where some of those that drop in enrollment is coming from.
A question, Superintendent. Excuse me, through the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Those 55 youngsters are scattered
They're scattered. I would say,
throughout a variety of grades.
disproportionately at the lower grade levels. But they are scattered across the grades. So then we take, and you have some offsets to those losses. And this is where the perceived spike is. So there are 17 students, unless Leah holds up some sign saying that there's more than this, but there's 17 students that we are seeing in our school district that are new to us, but new to us because they're electing to stay in their summer home, so it's families that have a summer home and an off-Cape home. They're electing to stay in their summer home and attend Monomoy, or they are electing to stay with their grandparents in the grandparents' home and attend Monomoy. And I think that 17, a lot of them are sort of I would say this is the 17 that, it's a compliment, that they're looking at what we've been doing and what we have been putting in place and what we are currently putting in place, and say, okay, this is better than what we've seen happen in terms of distance learning, or that, you know, as I mentioned, we have some of the highest amounts of, you know, the in-person learning. You can pre-K through grade 7, have full day in-school learning, where in their district it might be all distance learning, or it may be 2 days, 2 days a week. So there's a number of families that have opted to stay because of what we're offering there.
And are those throughout, where's that concentration?
They are again throughout, throughout the grade levels. And then we have, because at least one of our neighboring school districts is fully remote, particularly at the high school level, and we have in-person learning, there are 5 students who previously school choiced out who have returned home. So they were Harwich and Chatham resident children, but are now back in our numbers, and they're predominantly at the upper grade levels. So, so it's a little crazy in terms of what this, what COVID has done. The big question is will the 5 that have come home stay if the other district goes back to back to in-person learning? Will the 17 students that are here in their summer homes, will the families realize, hey, we can make a living and do our jobs remotely post-COVID? Will they stay, and will we see I would call that's one of those silver linings? Will we see a silver lining of COVID that families can start to look at the Cape as a place that they can stay and raise a family? So will those 17 stay post-COVID, or will they return to their off-Cape homes? And then on the other side, it's will the 51 or was it 55? Sorry, 55 that are electing to homeschool, will any of them continue to homeschool, or will those 55 return? So lots of unknowns out there, but it's definitely a very odd year for enrollments. And typically well, not typically, every year we submit our October 1 numbers. This is sort of a preview of where we see the numbers a week away from October 1.
I have a question, but Jackie first, and then I've got a question. Go ahead.
The 17 students that presumably are summer home or grandparents or whatever, those are remote learning or in-school learning, that they're mixed? And also to address the no new families of Chatham Elementary, that's none of those 17 are at Chatham Elementary, either remote or in person.
Right, so I believe that the bulk of the 17 really are, they have opted to stay because of in-person learning options that we have.
So they're possibly physically in school?
Right.
Okay.
Then one of the things that you brought up, and this is a concern I have, just again about Chatham Elementary and Chatham Elementary enrollment is, these little, the little increases there of those 17, we're seeing them in Harwich Elementary, we're seeing them at the middle school, we're seeing them at the high school. We're not seeing them at Chatham Elementary. And my worry again, it's what does Chatham need to do as a town to retain young families? I think at the moment, I believe there's only one home on the market in Chatham under 500,000, and it's just the real estate market has started to skyrocket, and I think it's made a town that was difficult for young families to find that starter house in, even more difficult to find that starter house in.
So I understand what you're saying, and I know that we don't need 1, 2, or 3 students. We need like 15 to make a classroom at Chatham. I get that. But my question was, of those 17, none of them are in person or remote at Chatham Elementary.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And then just to foreshadow some interesting challenges as we look forward, you'll notice that preschool, which feeds kindergarten at Chatham Elementary, is only, is it 4 or 5?
5.
It's only 5. So again, it's, we're, and we, we typically run, and this, I don't know if the committee knows what we've had to do to make the in-person learning happen, but we typically run a morning preschool at Chatham Elementary and an afternoon preschool at Chatham Elementary. Because of COVID, we are only running our preschools that the school is doing for the students with the intensive needs, because we need to maintain those distances. We only have one Chatham preschooler, so we are transporting that Chatham preschool. So we actually aren't running preschool at Chatham Elementary currently. So we've gone from a morning and afternoon session to what would have been one session at Chatham Elementary of preschool. And, so we're going to be struggling to, we will, encourage Harwich families to come over to kindergarten, but our kindergarten numbers are, continuing to go down into the sort of unprecedented places at Chatham Elementary. But that we'll be dealing with at the end of this year when we look at staffing and what the program starts to look like. But I just wanted that on, people's long-range radar screens.
Can I ask, so I have a question, because this has come up, and I know I did shoot this over to you, but I think maybe for the listening audience. So when somebody chooses to homeschool, how does that affect our budget? I mean, can you just walk us through that?
So, at least in terms of our 2 towns, it doesn't impact the assessment. So we, the assessment will continue to be the assessment for this year. Each child brings some state aid with them, but if you think about it, that state aid is supporting that student. So technically, the students that aren't here, it's not, we're not seeing state aid come for them. We're also not having some of the expenses of them. So I would call it more of a budgetary wash. So there's, I do think that there'll be somewhat of a hit to the budget in that we would anticipate the Chapter 70 aid for 55 students, and that's going to be gone, but some of the resources that those 55 would have, it's not, so they aren't like a school choice student that's bringing in $5,000 at a time. It's less with that, with the state aid that's coming.
Okay, Nancy?
Are they considered foundation enrollment? Once they're homeschooled, they're removed from foundation?
They're out of our foundation enrollment.
Okay.
So, so our enrollment this year is like oddly artificially off. There is one other category of student that's not anywhere on this, and that is, there are kids, I presume, in both of our towns that are living in that second house and still going to school wherever their school is, because just as we're offering distance learning, a student could go to grandmother's in some distance place and still be doing distance learning electronically with us, and I suspect that there are some families that that may be here from Boston or New York that are continuing to do school from here, from afar, but again, they would not show up in our foundation or enrollment or in these numbers here. But I do imagine that we have some of those students in our community, and I think that that's where, I think it's the combination of those individuals and the 17 that we're seeing here that, that have kind of gone through the rumor mill in both of our towns, and it's inflated to be a number that seems to be so big that it's a spike, but there's all this other stuff that's going on. So, so 17 new kids at Monomoy might be a slight spike in a particular year, but it's offset by, by some of these other negating factors.
Okay. Any questions, Sharon or Joe? None from either of you? Okay.
All right, as complex as the math was on that, the next topic was just a skosh more complex, and that gets to what Friday evening and Saturday look like for the school superintendent, the high school principal, and thank goodness we have Joy Jordan as well, who it was. So Friday evening, I get a text message that we have our first positive student case in one of our school buildings, and we had been planning for this. We were hoping that it was going to happen far into the future, but realistically, we knew that that it was a matter of when, not if. So we. It was late enough that we knew that we couldn't start communicating out at that point, and one of the most important things that has to happen when this comes in, we had the report of the positive wasn't from a board of health or a doctor, it was from a parent, and we needed to understand what type of test was it and the details, so we needed sort of this official confirmation. Because you could imagine that you wouldn't want to see the school superintendent, sort of quarantining and closing things, only to find out that there was a miscommunication. So I would just like to extend an appreciation to Megan Eldridge, who is the director of the Board of Health, the health director for the town of Harwich, who has been amazing to work with through this. And Megan Eldridge was able to reach out to, to the public health sources and confirm the positive with this case, and also to, on a Saturday, mobilize the contact tracers in the area. So both of our towns are using the Visiting Nurse Association as contact tracers. So they mobilized on Saturday with us to kind of walk you through the order of play that happened is a combination of Joy, Jen Police, myself, and Cheryl Default were in contact. We agreed we'd start at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, but Joy and I were already modifying the emails that would be going out to all the different parties much earlier than that. One of the important things that we wanted to do is to make sure that we got our arms around who were close contacts, and advice that I have had for my other superintendent colleagues is, if you have the capacity to contact trace on your own, even though the Visiting Nurse Association does a wonderful contact tracing, you want to do it as quickly as you can. So. So Jen went and had a Google Meet session with the student and parents to talk about what are the immediate close contacts that we should think about, because we wanted to, to reach out to those families and make sure that sleepovers weren't going to happen on Saturday night, and kids weren't heading off to, to games and this, that, and the other. So we were trying to get the students that we were most concerned that might be exposed to somebody that was positive, and to ensure that they were getting quarantined and their families communicated with about the need to get a COVID test, ideally with the PCR swab that will tell you if you are currently infected and positive. So it's sort of the gold standard for testing. So we had all of that communication. So we did the contact tracing and had the students identified by noon, and we had 3 of our nurses donate time this weekend. So Jamie Staniels, who is a brand new nurse at Chatham Elementary School, Carol Fiocco, the nurse at the middle school, and also Amy Sullivan, who's at the middle school this year, went and got on the phone and called each one of the close contacts to make sure that the family understood, knew. Joy and I had an email that went out to each of them, just clarifying and sort of confirming that conversation that the nurses had had. And then we communicated out to the entire class, and I think that this was sort of a realization to me, is that there's communicating to close contacts, and then there's the way I, in my position, want to make sure that we are dealing with close contacts, and that the VNA and the state would say that we should only be quarantining the student who's positive and the students who are immediately adjacent to them, because in a classroom, because we have 6-foot spacing, so it should be just those. I think that's fine and dandy unless you're in my shoes, and to try to explain why this child who's 6 foot away is a close contact, and that the person that's 12 foot away isn't, because the definition of a close contact is to be within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. Well, it's like, I don't want to freak Meredith out, but if I was positive, we have been 12 feet away, but it's been a lot longer than 15 minutes. So I have opted to be far more conservative than what the state's saying. So we are quarantining classrooms of students. The challenge at a high school compared to an elementary school, at an elementary school you have one classroom, one teacher, maybe one teaching assistant. At a high school students has 6 in-person classes, so there's 6 classrooms, 6 teachers, and maybe somebody who was there at lunch, guidance counselor they worked with, and it gets a little more complicated, which is where we got to this supply and demand need for additional subs. So we communicated out to the families that had a child in the classroom. Lesson learned, I'll own this one. We did not do a phone blast to that group, and I think should this happen again, and my Lord, I hope it doesn't happen again, or not for many more months until I've recovered from this one, a phone blast to those families would be helpful. It's more than the nurses could easily get to. It was an additional 77 students beyond the close contact list, but we got to, but they all got emails, and then we communicated out to the school, to the district, to the media. So it was sort of layer on top of layer on top of layer. But the nice thing is, by being apparently the first in the state to have the positive student in their building, because we were one of the first in the state to open up, we have a really great communications package all set to share with any other school district out there. So,
Way to blaze the trail.
So Monomoy leads the way. I'll answer any questions people have on that, but all of those communications happened, I think, before 4 p.m. that day. So, it was a lot, particularly when I think it was maybe almost 10:30 that we got the confirmation of the positive. To have it all sort of flow from there was relatively quick, given everything that had to happen.
All right. Great, thank you. So questions, Meredith?
I just have, as far as the re-entry goes, for those kids that were quarantined, if they weren't that immediate close contact, is it just an option to get tested? And then if they don't get tested, they just get to come back in 14 days?
So, fantastic question. Again, Jen's dealing with this at the high school, and the high school, because of this rotating group of students, there are tiers of students who have different reentry dates that they're communicating out, because it's 14 days from last contact with the person who's positive. And so I think some of our hindsight challenges are, we initially communicated out that anybody in these 6 specific classes, and, so it was this teacher's, this block class, this teacher's, this, so 6 specific teachers and one of their blocks. And the initial communication out was that you could return into school on October 2nd, which is next Friday, because the student's last day in school was a Thursday. And then it turns out that some of the students, by virtue of the way the schedule was rotating, were with the student last on, let's say, a Monday, and some on a Wednesday, and some on that Thursday. So there's sort of a tier on, they've communicated back out to families on, here's the date that you were last in. But to kind of get back to the question, so it's 14 days from the time that you were last in the classroom with the student. And then a common question that we have gotten is, well, can't I just get a nasal swab, and if I'm negative, come in because I tested negative? And the answer is no. So the standard on this is, if you've had the swab, you are still quarantining for 10 days after that swab, and it takes a few days for that swab to come back. So you're still out for 14 days, and there's a reason for that. One of my colleagues who reached out this past week has a situation that we was just wanting some advice on, where the individual got swabbed and it was negative, and a couple days later the student is starting to get sick, presenting symptoms. They swab again and it's positive, and it's sort of like they were asking, how does this happen? And I was kind of explaining it all, but so if you get that nasal swab too early in the infection, you might not be expressing the virus, and it might not get picked up. So you can have a person who will become positive. So that's why you have that sort of safety window, that if you've been swabbed and it's negative, and 10 days after that they still aren't developing symptoms, then that was a good swab. So that's where, and I know there's some angst with some parents, because this also is the time when tryouts for sports was happening, and it was sort of like, well, can I get my kids swabbed so they can get, be at tryouts? So Karen Kamelt was doing a subsequent round of communication out to families on how we will handle that, the sports tryouts, and kids can still try out for sports. It'll just, we'll just have an extended window for them, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Sharon or Joe? Nothing? Anybody else? All right, well, thank you for that, and I really appreciate all the quick, fast work over the weekend, in less than 24 hours, I think it was. So thank you. Oh, other stuff, go ahead.
So just, we do have students that are in quarantine related to the latest thing that people have seen in the media reports. So there were a couple positive cases with Chatham Fire that have us quarantining some individuals and waiting to see the results of those tests. And based on those tests, if they're positives, then we'll have to respond. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that everybody's negative and okay. And it's, so, I mean, there's this, I had a superintendent friend text me earlier today saying, I'm feeling like my job this year is just communicating out about one COVID situation after the other COVID situation. And the answer is, that's what it seems like. So it's challenging in terms of that. Just two last very quick things. Next Tuesday, 6 p.m., I'll have my first virtual conversation with parents and just touching base with them on how the beginning of the school year is going, and I'll hopefully help reduce some anxieties and answer some questions. One of the things I'm clearly going to be communicating out to parents more, and I'll probably do this in a little email blast tomorrow too. I think one of my concerns that I have for us globally is I've been communicating out about the need for masking and the need for social distancing and hand washing, and I think I really need to, in my position, reinforce the need for us to make our social bubbles smaller for now, because I do think that as this pandemic has gone on, I think that we've let those social bubbles grow a little too large, and I think some of what we're seeing and some of the quarantining that's going on now is partly because of some social bubbles that have gotten pretty big. And you can imagine that a staff member or a student who has a really large social bubble, should somebody in that social bubble become positive, we end up quarantining a whole lot of people. And if we want to keep the schools going, I think we're going to have to, maybe take a deep breath and take a step backwards and say, okay, how big has my social bubble been in the last 2 weeks? And I think the smaller we can make them, and I'm not militant saying it's like, don't leave your house, don't interact with anybody else, but I do think we have to, as a school community, kind of bring those back in a little bit if we want to keep our schools open this year. My daughter called me up last night, and she's like, she's concerned that that we're just going to keep quarantining, and we get to this point that that nobody's in school. And I was like, yeah, but we can control that, and that's and we can do this. Very last thing, just a reminder, we've already mentioned it, but Harwich Town meeting this Saturday, 10 a.m. on our high school football field. There are 3 warrant articles that have implications for our program. The first one being the budget, which comes early on in the articles that are out there. Middle of the pack, we have enhancements to our television studio here and our ability to broadcast out school committee meetings and the daily news to our community. That's a warrant article that is different than our budget in that the taxpayers have already paid for those cable upgrades. So the taxpayers have a surcharge that happens on all of their cable and internet bills. There's a surcharge that goes into a revolving fund in the town of Chatham, in the town of Harwich. Both towns are paying 50-50 for the enhancements to the AV equipment here, but it's already been paid for. It's sitting in the revolving fund. Chatham's already voted at their town meeting. The request would be to have the Harwich taxpayers pay for that. Then late in the day, almost one of the last warrant articles is the Harwich Community Playground Project at Harwich Elementary School, which is a $500,000 project, again, already paid for out of CPC money that is, is part of the tax bills. So it's already there in account for community preservation projects like this one at the Harwich Elementary School. So we could really use the support of folks at town meeting, and please keep in mind that we actually have things at the beginning, middle, and end of town meeting. So we could use you there for the full morning.
Yeah, the duration. Anybody, any other comments or questions? Okay, so let's move on. Action items, we have taken care of everything. The presentation of the warrants, they've made their way around the room, so they've been signed. And now we're down to our final public comment. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes, additional time at the discretion of the chair. Anyone for public comment? Go ahead, Charles.
Thank you. I just want to express, as a member of the public and perhaps on behalf of the public, the deepest appreciation to the committee for all the time and effort and good thinking they're putting in to the policy on school committee meetings and the role of the public in those meetings. I had a very wise group of mentors through my career who used to emphasize with me that process is often more important, or at least as important, as product. And I know conducting your business is a process matter and can be more boring. The exciting stuff are the final decisions, the big outcomes that you make, whether it's a curriculum program, budget, or whatever. But unless you have the support and understanding of the public, that's really at the heart of the success of any committee or any project. So hope you don't feel discouraged about the lengthy time that you're putting in on that, because I think it's going to be very worthwhile in the long run. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to understand most of what Jackie had to say during the discussion or technical issues. I kept my mouth closed because I wasn't in public comments. So I didn't want to make that known. I have a situation similar to Joe's where I really right now have to be attending these meetings virtually. I wish I could be there more in person. But just as a point of information, I don't know how a member of the public can deal with it when they're not hearing the broadcast of important discussion that's going on. And Jackie always has so much of importance to lend to the discussions from my perspective, as do each of you. And finally, a couple of observations on your discussion tonight. I support, at one point it was mentioned, eliminating rule number 5 under the section public comment at school committee meetings. That had to deal with written comments for anything longer than 3 minutes. I don't think that section is necessary. If somebody has that much to say, they can always send an email, as I would do, to the committee that they want the committee to hear.
Charles, I think we lost you. The sound has gone out. Oh, he's frozen. All right.
He knew he was approaching 2 minutes.
Yeah, the timer was going off. Charles, we'll kind of hang tight and wait for you to come back in just a sec. Anybody else from the public in the room? All right, there you go, Charles. Go ahead.
I thought I had exceeded my time limit. I'm looking for the yellow light and the red light that they have congressional hearings for the speakers. Just that section, rule number 2, where it uses the wording extenuating circumstances to extend the speaker's time. I would think that's another place, as you were looking for places where at the discretion of the chair could be the wording for consistency for those 2 points. But again, thank you so very much for taking the deliberations on this particular matter so seriously. It means a lot to me as a member of the public. And don't lose too much sleep about that clarifying questions. For someone to have a clarifying question, they've got to be paying darn close, detailed attention to what's going on at meetings and really determined to follow and want to know this stuff as much as the members of the school committee. That doesn't take in too big a population of the public. If at some meeting there's a huge crowd over one issue, well, you know, you can deal with that, and all the more important that everyone who has misunderstandings goes out of that meeting with clear understandings, because you always want full public support as much as possible to what you're doing. So again, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Charles, for clarifying that. All right, I think we are now at the end. Just a reminder to school committee members, we have our workshop next week at 6 o'clock, and then we'll be back here in a couple of weeks for our next meeting. So motion to adjourn. All right, Nancy.
Second that motion.
All right, Nancy made the motion. Joe has seconded. Roll call, starting with Sharon.
Aye.
Joe?
Joe Osceola, yes.
Jackie? Yeah. Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we are officially adjourned at 9:10. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.